We are sometimes defined by a characteristic or a set of values or beliefs, but in the grand scheme of things, we're all in it together. And we're all under assault right now.
We, a lot of times, will gender people before they're born and asking questions of is it a boy or a girl before we even know who they are.
She hadn't responded to us much ever as a baby. One of her first complete sentences, "Why do you keep calling me a boy?" To use her words, she's got a boy body and a girl brain.
If I see a suit and tie at the store, I'm gonna wear it, and I'm gonna rock it, and I'm gonna go into school and wear it. Like, I don't care what people are gonna say.
Nobody is mean to your face, but they're mean online.
I'm sorry, your child is what? Trans what? What does that mean? Does that mean they want to be a boy? Is your child a boy? Or were they born a boy? I should not have to answer these questions about my 5-year-old daughter.
In 1972, Title IX, one of the most widely recognized education laws in the U.S., was implemented under the Nixon administration as an effort to provide equal opportunity in education. The law states, "No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance." In 2014, 42 years later, the U.S. Department of Education issued guidelines under President Obama that protect transgender students under Title IX. In early 2017, the Trump administration revoked those guidelines, leaving the protection of transgender students in the hands of individual school administrations.
I was not prepared to call to speak with the principal and go in and meet and be told that they weren't equipped to handle a child like mine and to not enroll them. She's seeking an education, a safe place, and I'm not going to send her anywhere where she's not safe. You can't even understand how to address my child. Tell me you don't have the capacity to deal with. All you need is empathy, compassion, and an open mind. She's a kid like anyone else. I promise you, if I had never told you this, you would never know. So since it finally warmed up, we were trying to spend a lot of time outside. I had always wanted to plant annuals. That's not something you can do where I'm from. My daughter and I went outside and we were planting bulbs in the ground. Hear footsteps coming from across the street. Our neighbor was very well respected within the community. Pretty much the go-to guy. Everyone said, you need X, Y, or Z. Go see Jim Bob across the street. When I looked up, he was standing there, angry. And my daughter stood up just to greet him. He pressed his finger into her chest. "Do you mean to tell me that's a girl?" He called my child that. He said, "That ain't no girl, that's a fucking faggot." She's 5 years old. She told me she doesn't remember that. I don't know how she couldn't. I will never forget it, nor my reaction. Which was not to slug him like I wanted to. Not to grab her, pick her up, throw her over my shoulder, and run. I couldn't say anything. I opened my mouth, no words came out. How does that happen? Paralyzing fear. How could somebody hate my child so much for simply being who she was? The neighborhood got violent. We had rocks thrown at the house. Nails in the driveway, punctured tires. It just got worse and worse. Within a month, we were moving in the middle of the night, hiding our children in the back of a U-Haul. How does that happen? In modern day America, we moved in the middle of summer. I continued researching schools. guide administration, parents, teachers, or faculty on any transgender issues, transgender inclusivity, on how to address safety issues, protocols, anything. There were no guidelines at all. This broke me as a parent. A mom. I'm supposed to protect her. That's my job. I didn't. Nobody thought she was worth protecting.
So my name is Dana Kaplan, and I'm the Director of Education at Outright Vermont. Outright Vermont, the mission of our organization is to build safe, healthy, and supportive environments for queer, trans, and questioning youth. There are bits of that story that sound all too familiar with what we know to be true of other families. We hear oftentimes of families that have had to relocate in search of a school that is going to be more safe. I mean, we're not even talking about affirming or celebratory. We're really just first trying to make sure that youth are safe on a daily basis. In terms of the education work, I primarily am focused on going into elementary, middle, and high schools, working with school educators and administrators to make sure that they know what it looks like and what it means to provide accommodation and deliver on all aspects of school in a way that is affirming to all students, regardless of gender, regardless of sexuality. We know that Vermont has good laws and good policy with regards to protections around perceived or actual gender identity and or sexual identity. But what we see is a lot of gap between the day-to-day lived experience of queer, trans, and questioning youth and what those policies tell schools they are beholden to do. So every 2 years in Vermont, there's a youth risk behavior survey that goes out to all students in middle and high schools, and it paints a really clear picture of the current context that those students are functioning in on a daily basis. And we see numbers in 2015 like queer and trans youth are 6 times more likely to have attempted suicide in the last 12 months than their heterosexual peers, and 4 times more likely to skip school because they don't feel safe going to school, or while at school they don't feel safe. Across every single risk behavior category, there is a discrepancy that just based on the identification of being LGBT, you are at a higher risk for any sort of depression, anxiety, physical violence, essential access to a quality of life that is safe and affirming.
The principal sounded fantastic. Uninformed, slightly confused, but said that he wanted to do everything he could to meet the needs of my children and provide them with an excellent education. After the road that I had been on, that sounded fabulous. The hundreds and hundreds of hours I've stared at a computer screen, reading article after research paper after research paper. It all seemed like it was finally paying off. And then school started. And it was great. It was absolutely fabulous for 3 whole days. On the 3rd day of school, at the end of the day, I had multiple frantic emails was from the school guidance counselor. They simply read, Mrs. Jones has told the faculty your child is a boy. What do you want me to do? It took a minute. It took more than a minute to put all the pieces together. Until I realized that this faculty member at the school was aware of my child's legally protected status. Even worse was the way the school handled it. They forced me to personally deal with this woman who not only intentionally outed my child and told everyone that she was biologically born male. Then I was allowing her to choose how she dressed like it was a game. There are no books for this. There is simply love your kid. Protect them, love them, and keep them whole. Do your best. Everywhere we went, my best wasn't good enough. And we've tried. And I need people to know that. I need them to know that this is normal. This is not. What's not normal is the way that we've been treated, is the way that this has been handled. My kid is totally normal. My tears are normal. I'm a mother and I'm heartbroken for my child. You would be too. And all I want is her to grow up and be happy and be loved.
My name is Paul Rocheleau. I'm a 5th grade teacher at Heinsberg Community School. I've been teaching here for 29 years, and I've had other teaching experience an additional 6 years. I've been teaching 35 years or so. So probably in the last 3 or 4 years is when I've noticed changes the most. I think before that, I wasn't conscious enough to think about gender as even an issue. I think what changes it the most is when you have students who are identifying differently, and those needs have to be met. Those needs are right there in front of you. They are real. There's other people involved. There are parents involved. There are students involved. Their dignity is involved. They have the right to be who they are in a classroom, in life, and I think it's our responsibility as educators to support that. It's also legally our obligation to treat people by their gender identity.
You know, we get into habits and patterns of how you run your classroom and how you do your job and how you feel like kids are going to thrive and learn, whether you're going to be challenged or eased into something. So having a student say, there was that one slip you made.
I don't actually teach about gender identity or anything like that in a calculated way. I usually approach it as it comes up. And as an example, last week in class we were having a discussion, and so I did talk. I just briefly introduced it to this group, the idea of that there's a binary where there's a male and a female at the end of the spectrum, and then in between there's any, like a rainbow, there's any combination of that in an identity, and even that there's questioning identity. So they were very interested in that sort of thing, and obviously some 10-year-olds are very clueless, is what I could say. They just don't really haven't ever thought about that sort of thing. A lot of adults are that way too. So it was an interesting opening, and they did want to know more. They did want to know more.
It's really important for younger kids because they have learned gender. They're being told how to practice their gender, and very frequently aren't getting opportunity, aren't being asked to authentically express their gender in all of the ways that they could be. And even if we're not talking about gender, they're learning it through so many different sources, through so many mediums and media and television and peers and just everywhere they look. They're getting messages about their gender and how they should be acting within that gender. But ultimately, I think it's important as educators, even with young children, to really be recognizing that we might not get to know how they identify their gender, and there are ways that we can act and practice in language that we can use that gives that space for them to find that and come to those understandings of themselves on their own.
But just like any other child in your school, any other student, any other parent of a student, I want my child to be protected. I want them safe, and I want them to have a quality education. And for a transgender child, number one, that means confidentiality. Number two, that means support. An effective support system in place means a program such as a Gay-Straight Alliance or other social programs at the student's level, perhaps guided by faculty. There needs to be inclusion rather than separation. Needs to be bringing together straight kids, trans kids, bisexual kids. This is not about sexuality. The end. This does not need to be excluded from elementary schools or even preschools.
As an educator, you look and you say, you don't want any, the impulse can be to be defensive, and have been and watched people react all of the ways that you can react when someone says, hey, here's something you could do better. We're talking about kids' safety, not just people's comfort level. Oh, I want this, I prefer that. No, it's who a person is.
So this book, George, is about somebody who feels like they are a girl inside but has a boy's body, just like the I Am Jazz book. But this book is really close to my heart, and right here it says, "Be who you are," which is a really good quote to tell anybody at school, and it says in the back too. My name is Francis. I go to HCS. I use they, them pronouns or just my name, and I'm 12 years old. So when I was younger, I remember I was in the car with my family, and we were talking about what we wanted to be when we grew up, and we were talking about like creatures and like what we wanted to do when we were older, and just in that category. And I remember my sister saying she wanted to be a monkey or something, and we were just talking about animals, and it got really goofy, and I said, I want to be a boy when I grow up. And my mom said that we could talk about it in more of a private setting. So later that day we were talking, and I said I wanted to use he, him pronouns at my house and everywhere else, but she, her pronouns at school. So that went on for maybe a month or so. It didn't go on for that long. And then my mom introduced me to they, them pronouns, and I thought that it really worked well for who I am, because I didn't like the feeling of I felt like I was two different people. And once I started using they and them pronouns, it got really easy. I remember telling them, and I walked up, and it was an all-team meeting, and I just said it in front of all of my grade, and I got really nervous at first, and then not many people really knew about they them pronouns, and they didn't really know about pronouns themselves. So I explained about that, and luckily I had a fantastic teacher, Miss Wallace, and she was so supportive and she was amazing, and she helped my peers learn about it and really get a grasp of what pronouns are. And I remember it changes really hard, so my peers had a hard time using the right pronouns at first, and then I did keep reminding people, and once I kept telling them, hey, I use they and them pronouns, it started getting on the right track. It's important for teachers to learn about the identities of other students, because they're their students and they need to know how that person is feeling and how they identify, and it can be really uncomfortable. I've experienced it. It's really uncomfortable when your pronouns are used wrong or somebody doesn't know, and it's hard to educate them. Like, it's hard when they don't get it. And it's really important for teachers and parents to really get it, because when I walk into places like Outright Vermont, like, it's like a breath of fresh air. Like, it feels so good because you know that people are there supporting you. And I feel like adults, parents, and teachers need to make sure that their kids can do that when they walk into school or their house. Like, they need to know, they need to make sure it's a safe space for students. GLOW is a group where LGBTQ plus people can come if they're having a hard time or if they want to talk to somebody, and it's a really good place to express your identity freely without judgment.
Had a couple of kids were interested in sitting down with me to figure out what they could do as a group to raise awareness, and to raise awareness with the adults and with their classmates. So they came to me, had a meeting, and I was very excited for them taking the initiative. And from there, we had a couple of adults that wanted to be their advisors, but it was all student-led, student-driven, and that's how it came to be.
After grad school, I did a little bit of job searching, and then found myself entering into education at a younger age than I was intending to, and started working in after school. And now I this year got to be the director of Imagine here at Heinsberg, and while doing that, I got to know the Heinsberg School a little better. And when I found out that they had a group called GLOW that was working with young queer populations, I just let Lynn know what some of my history and past has been and my experience, and she got really excited and wanted to bring me on board, and I was able to find a way to make that work. And so I've started this January working with the group. One thing I will say that I think is awesome is that this is the only school I'm aware of in the CSSU grouping of middle schools that has a group like this for students. And to my knowledge, it's pretty rare that a group even has 6th graders as a part of it. When you look at Outright's GSA conference, most of those groups are 7th and 8th graders, if they're even that young. So I think that's a really proud point to have here, and something that I think many of the educators in this school are proud of.
For the longest time, we had gender groupings, whether it was in the PE classes or even in some of our classroom exercises, boys on this side, girls on this side. And that was one of the very first things that the students wanted to address, is that really is a situation that could make some students uncomfortable. So they came and they presented to our faculty about a couple of the things that they wanted to raise awareness on, and the change in awareness was really helpful.
Students should know that they are protected, and it feels really great for me to be here because I know that people are there rooting for me and protecting me and keep making sure that people like me and myself are safe. Because if people don't feel safe, sometimes they feel like they don't want to go to school, or they feel like they don't want to leave the house. You want to make sure that people know what you're trying to do for them.
And I think the sooner we recognize that, the sooner we support people in the clarity around who they are and honoring who they are, the better.
We know that youth are coming out at younger and younger ages. I think that's one of the trends that we're seeing. We know that that part of your brain forms between the ages of 2 and 4. And so, you know, when people say to us, middle school is too young to have a gender and sexuality alliance group, no, it's not. It's actually the perfect time to have those spaces, because youth are questioning their identity from years and years before that. And if you are denying them that space, then you essentially are not giving them the opportunity to find healthy and productive ways to explore who they are. And then we know what that leads to, because we know what the YRBS data tells us.
It's really good to have confidence in yourself, and I've learned that over the years, that I was thinking about what other people thought of me, and like eventually I just stopped caring what people thought. Like, I cared about them using the right pronouns for me, but I was like, you know, if I see a suit and tie at the store, I'm gonna wear it, and I'm gonna rock it, and I'm gonna go into school and wear it. Like, I don't care what people are gonna say. It's really about knowing yourself and loving yourself.
Heinsberg Community School has made such immense strides concerning transgender inclusivity. But why is there such a gap between Karen and Francis's stories? How can these two school communities be so different within our small state? And how do we go about bridging this gap? It is our responsibility as educators, as parents, as students, administrators, leaders, and members of our community to ensure that every child is safe, supported, and celebrated within our schools. Our legacy is not our history. It is not the things that will be written in books or engraved in stone. Our legacy lies not in the past, but in our future and in the path we clear for generations to come. Our legacy is what we do for each other in our community. It is the lessons we teach our children and the difference we make for those we love. A legacy of acceptance and friendship will not be forgotten. What kind of legacy will you leave?